It'd be a turning point for Egypt. State media reporting a further 24 ISIS-affiliated militants killed in reprisal air raids in the Sinai desert this Thursday. This one day after what's described as North Sinai's boldest attack yet, one where the jihadists for the first time seemed to try and actually hold territory. The government fighting on two fronts while the battle is still rages in Sinai on Wednesday. Back in Cairo, at least 9 killed in a raid on the banned Muslim Brotherhood. The week that marks the 2nd anniversary of the ouster of the Brotherhood-backed president, also the one where the new president, Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, attended the funeral of Egypt's state prosecutor. It's the most high-profile political assassination since the toppling of the country's first elected civilian leader. And this funeral followed by fresh vows of revenge and lightning-fast passage of new legislation to speed up court cases against dissidents. How effective are Sisi's fight fire with fire policies? What stands for Sinai neighbor Israel and Western backers? We'll be checking reactions. Today in the France 24 debate, Egypt at daggers drawn. With us to talk about it, Maïssa Abdel Latif, the president of the Women's for Human Rights Organization. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
I want to thank, welcome back, Assiem El-Difraoui, the author of Egyptian Notebooks. Nice to see you. We're joined as well by Gil Mahaley, editor-in-chief of Causeur. Tell us what Causeur is.
It's a monthly political magazine and internet site.
An internet site. Gil Mahaley, Israeli-born journalist. Thank you for being with us. Thanks as well to Mohammed El Alfi, political analyst. Welcome back to the show, sir.
My pleasure.
The France 24 debate, where you can join the conversation on Facebook and Twitter, our hashtag F24Debate. They fought all day on Wednesday. State media claim 100 militants killed in the North Sinai, along with 17 soldiers, 4 of them officers. Now, with no journalists present on site, it's hard to confirm official tolls. We're more on this story now with William Hildebrand.
An already bloody week in Egypt, now even bloodier. On Wednesday evening, Egyptian television was showing images of scores of dead militants killed after one of the country's largest insurgent operations in recent years. Earlier, dozens, including civilians, lost their lives when well-armed jihadists unleashed an unprecedented wave of attacks on military checkpoints and police stations close to Sheikh Zayed in the Sinai Peninsula. F-16 fighter jets and Apache helicopters were being deployed by the Egyptian military, with airstrikes continuing into the early hours of Thursday. Egypt's military has since said that the situation was 100% under control. An Islamic State group publication online said the attack was carried out with their affiliates in the Sinai. This comes just 2 days after a car bomb in Cairo killed a senior public prosecutor. He was the highest-ranking Egyptian official to be killed in years. An increasingly brazen Islamist insurgency that's prompted Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi to draft new anti-terrorism laws, which were accepted by the cabinet on Wednesday. He said the new measures would provide quick and just deterrence against terrorism.
Assiem El-Difraoui, what do we know about the militants who are fighting in North Sinai and what their strategy is?
Oh, we know quite a lot about the militants. We know that, for instance, we shouldn't always talk about the Islamic State in Egypt. This is just an escalation of older grievances. Basically, most of the militants are local Bedouin tribesmen who feel discriminated for a very, very long time by all previous Egyptian regimes, meaning that a lot of Egyptians regard the Bedouins as not Egyptians. They have been excluded from economic development in tourist-rich southern Sinai. They have been not implicated in infrastructural development projects in northern Sinai, and a lot of those people lost their livelihoods because they were living through smuggling to Gaza when the Egyptian army very forcefully closed the hundreds of tunnels which linked Rafah especially to the Gaza strip, and really destroyed like hundreds of houses. So there's a huge miscontent which doesn't date from yesterday among northern Sinai Bedouins. And that makes them very easy recruiting targets for jihadist organizations.
So it doesn't mean that all Bedouins, of course, are jihadists.
Not at all, not at all. But they have been disenfranchised for a long time from Egyptian societies. They have really very old grievances, very rightful grievances. And initially, when Sisi took over power, he promised the Bedouins some huge infrastructure projects, some economic betterment, but nothing of this was fulfilled. And as more of those tribesmen you kill, as the more also you create cycles of revenge. I mean, never forget, these are still very clinic societies. If you attack like with F-16s and Apache helicopters and you have civilian deaths, a whole clan will, by tribal solidarity, be really furious against the Egyptian government and might join jihadist movements.
All right, so a spiral. And just a word again about what happened Wednesday. Analysts all saying this is the first time they actually, like we've seen in Syria and Iraq, try to actually hold territory. I'm
not that sure that they really try to hold territory, because they know it's very difficult to hold territory against a modern army. But this was the largest attacks we have seen. But this conflict is brewing for at least 3 years. I mean, there have been dozens of attacks and hundreds of dead Egyptian soldiers so far. And we don't cover this conflict as long as they're not really in one day 15 simultaneous attacks. But everybody who knows Egypt, and especially Sinai, knew for a long time that northern Sinai is some kind of a kind of theater of civil war.
All right, so Mohammed Al-Alfi, you heard the description there, an attack in on an area where you have a clanic society. It breeds more resentment, and there's a spiral of attacks, crackdown, attack, crackdown. How do we break this cycle?
Let me say it frankly, Egypt in an open war against terrorism in Sinai. Yes, we know, I agree with Mr. Dessouky that we have a problem in Sinai due to the mistakes of Mubarak regime, that he didn't work to develop Sinai, and he didn't create a new life for Sinai people. So now we Egyptian army or whole Egypt now is watching the massacre of last Wednesday. But unfortunately, we are not in front or against the Bedouin of Sinai. We are against terrorism groups. That is a part in Sinai and a part inside the country. In Sinai, we are against Beit al-Maqdis, extremist group, backed by some extremist group, the Salafis in Gaza, feeding them by logistic support and trainer elements. And also inside Cairo, we are facing a huge criminals belongs to Brotherhood, a part of Brotherhood. Part of them decided to carry guns against the government. What we have to do? We have.
And are the two linked?
Yeah, we have. Yes, we have to protect the country. We have to work hard to, of course.
So there's no other solution than military force.
I'm afraid I can't let it stand this way.
Yeah.
First, let's make a separation between Muslim Brotherhood and really jihadi groups in Sinai. And from the beginning out, everybody is hoping that the Sisi regime was reaching out for national reconciliation, even under difficult circumstances. Engage some dialogue with the Muslim Brotherhood.
But people are connecting the dots because these attacks happen the week of the second anniversary of the overthrow of President Morsi.
Reconciliation with terrorism or with terrorism groups. We can't talk about reconciliation.
No, I mean, you can start a political process. And obviously,
political process, I mean, with whom exactly?
Exactly. I mean, there are some offers, from moderate Muslim Brotherhood leaders, which haven't been taken. You might continue, please.
Yes, I would just like to extend my my self-presentation. First of all, yes, I'm a head of a women's human rights organization that I had founded here, but actually I'm a co-founder of an organization that is called Egyptians Abroad for Democracy Worldwide, which we founded in Rabat. So actually, I spent the whole time in the sit-in of Rabat. Unfortunately, I had
the sit-in of Rabat. Just to explain to our viewers, where after the overthrow of President Morsi,
his
supporters had gathered. before a crackdown?
Actually, we were the supporters of democracy. It doesn't have to be the supporters of Morsi, or we were supporters of democracy. We had people who had voted for Shafiq, for instance, who had not voted for Morsi because they lost their choice. They lost their ability to choose, you know. So I actually stayed in Rabat for 45 days. So I'm pro-democracy. So if Mr. Alfi is saying we cannot reconcile, we cannot start a political, there was a political process taking place. How did Sisi come to power? By the rule of weapon. He did not come by the rule of ballot boxes. So he's illegitimate from the very first beginning. Let me put 3 points that are basic in this discussion or in this debate. Now we are talking about an authoritarian, I'm sorry, it's a one-man show, authoritarian regime, yeah, where one man is ruling the country with his own choices, you know, and also.
Right, but how do you expect him to react when you have had this political assassination, a car bomb in Cairo, when you have an attack on soldiers? How is the government supposed to react when soldiers are attacked in North Sinai? What is he supposed to do?
Okay, let's go back 3 years ago. What was happening? There were always bombing in Sinai. Journalists are banned from Sinai. You just said in your presentation, you know, that they are not allowed. Independent journalists are not allowed. Only the only source of information is the military. So what do you expect from the military to give information? What kind of information does the military want to give? Actually, the spokesperson, the military spokesperson, just yesterday, he posted a video about an aircraft or a military craft that was bombing terrorists down. And then afterwards, activists found out that this was not in Sinai. That was the time ago from Afghanistan. It was an American military craft.
All right, but that still leaves us with the problem. Let me put it to you, Gil Mehaly. What should the Egyptian government be doing about North Sinai?
Well, it's not up to Israel to say. What is a source of concern to Israel is that Egypt, for the last 4 years, or about 4 years, has a legitimacy crisis. Ever since the January-February revolution in 2011, whatever power, because even the former president, the elected president, suffered from an acute legitimacy problem. This is why what happened 2 years ago was supported by so many Egyptians. So there's a fundamental problem with the most important Arab country. Has a long border with Israel. It has many contingencies with Israel, but it also had many points in common.
And I believe
the Gaza question is obvious, but I remind you that there was a gas supply agreement, and because of the civil war in Sinai, the radicals in Sinai cut the supply of gas from Egypt to Israel and to Jordan. So it's already a strategic problem. The second problem is that if you look at the map, sooner or later, they will target the Suez Canal. Now, the enlargement of Suez Canal... They already did. The enlargement of Suez Canal is a flag project of the current president. Now, if you don't need to hit a boat, you only need to fire Katyushas that will fall in the water, and the insurance companies will do the rest. So it is a major political and strategical menace, and I'm not talking about ideological and political spillover to the very complicated relationship between Israel and the different Palestinian movements.
All right, for an idea of the president's reaction and what he plans to do, he spoke before Wednesday's attacks. This was on Tuesday at the funeral of State Prosecutor Hisham Barakat, killed in that spectacular car bombing in the Heliopolis district of Cairo.
We will amend the legislation in a way that will enable us to enforce the law and justice as quickly as possible. We will not take 5 to 10 years to try those killing us. They give out orders from their prison cells, and the orders become reality while we're carrying out the law. We'll respect the law, but we will amend it so that it's parallel to what we're facing.
What does he mean?
He means even more repressive policy. But excuse me, I'd like to continue this one. But you raised a very, very valid point. There's a crisis of legitimacy in Egypt for a long time. Morsi didn't have much legitimacy and was behaving like a very authoritarian ruler. Sisi has a decreasing legitimacy, even he came to power with a lot of popular support and obviously the help of the military. But this leads us to a larger question. The Egyptian political culture, or the political culture of Egyptian leaders, seems to be extremely immature. Nobody is willing to talk to each other, which will lead us to a spiral of violence. I mean, there were huge opportunities after the fall of Mubarak to do national unity governments, to do national action plans, to really get the Egyptians together. Now we are in a polarizing course, more confrontation, and I don't think there will be a simple military solution. All these conflicts in Egypt are really caused by several groups: disenfranchised, unsatisfied Muslim Brotherhoods members, a real jihadi movement, and so on. So, but how are you going to unite Egypt instead of polarizing it? Nobody seems to answer the question. And how can you ignore political Islam, which is another expression for the Muslim Brotherhood, when you can be sure that 20 or 30 or 40% of Egyptians would adhere to this current of political Islams? So what's the perspective? Egypt doesn't have a parliament at this stage. And this conflict justifies more and more authoritarian measures. So where is the issue? I don't see an issue at this stage.
All right.
If there's no huge outreach campaign to people who have been disenfranchised from politics, be that adherents of political Islam or Bedouins in Sinai, or even by now imprisoned former revolutionaries.
All right, when we come back, we'll put it to the rest of the panel. How do you reach across the aisle in such an atmosphere with what we've seen this past week? You're watching the France 24 debate.